I'm Catherine, and I grew up in what you might call a big family. Dad was hell-bent on having a son. So, they kept trying, over and over. Mom got pregnant again and again until the doctors finally put their foot down. No more, they said. It's too risky. That's when Mom and Dad finally threw in the towel on their dream of a boy. Being the oldest, I got stuck with a lot of the grunt work. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sisters, but sometimes it felt like I was more of a parent than a sibling. I had to grow up fast, you know? While other kids were out playing, I was changing diapers, doing laundry, and helping Mom with everything around the house. Things really changed when my youngest sister was born. It was like Mom and Dad suddenly remembered they were parents. They showered her with attention, bought her the best toys, signed her up for every club and activity under the sun. Whatever she wanted, she got. One day, when I was about 14, I overheard Mom talking on the phone. "I just don't have time for the older girls anymore," she said. "Catherine's handling it, though. She's such a good helper." Helper, that's what I was reduced to. Not a daughter, not even a sister. Just a helper. But I had a secret that kept me going. My grandmother, Mom's mother. They'd had some big falling out years ago and hadn't spoken since. But I'd managed to find her number, and we'd been talking in secret. As I got older, I started to dream about college. I wanted more for myself than just being the family babysitter. But when I graduated high school, Mom and Dad dropped a bombshell on me. "There's no money for your education, Catherine," Dad said, not even looking me in the eye. "You need to get a job and help out financially. We need to save for your sister's education." That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling trapped and hopeless. But then I remembered my secret weapon, Grandma. The next day, I called her, spilling out everything between sobs. "Don't you worry, sweetheart," she said, her voice firm and determined. "I'll pay for your college. You deserve a chance at a better life." And just like that, a whole new world opened up for me. I applied to colleges in other cities, dreaming of a fresh start. When I got accepted to study economics, I was over the moon. But my parents, they didn't see it that way. "You're abandoning your family," Mom accused, her eyes cold. "After everything we've done for you." Done for me? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I've been raising your kids since I was a kid myself." "Get out," Dad said, his voice low and angry. "If you're going, then go. But don't expect any support from us." I packed my bags that night, my sisters watching with tear-filled eyes. "Don't go, Kathy," they pleaded. "I have to," I told them, hugging each one tight. "But I'll always be here for you. Always." As I walked out the door, I heard Dad's voice behind me. "Girls, you are not to have any contact with Catherine. Do you understand?" As I settled into college life, I felt like I could finally breathe. The campus was bustling with energy, and for once, I didn't have to worry about anyone but myself. But even as I embraced this new chapter, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. I missed my sisters fiercely. Despite my parents' ban, I couldn't bear the thought of completely cutting ties with them. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. My heart raced as I answered. "Kathy?" It was my second youngest sister's voice, barely above a whisper. "Emily? Is that you?" I could hardly contain my excitement. "Yeah, it's me. I'm using my friend's phone. Mom and Dad can't know." We talked for hours that night, catching up on everything. Emily told me how things had changed at home, how our parents were even stricter now, and how much they all missed me. "Even Sarah?" I asked, referring to our youngest sister. There was a pause on the other end. "Sarah, she's different, Kathy. She told Mom and Dad about us calling you. They took our phones away, but don't worry, we'll find ways to keep in touch. We love you, Kathy." Those secret calls became my lifeline. My sisters, except for Sarah, would use their friends' phones to reach out to me. We'd talk about their lives, their dreams, and I'd share stories about college. It wasn't the same as being there, but it was something. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my studies. Economics fascinated me, and I found myself excelling in my classes. My professors took notice, and soon I was being recommended for internships and special projects. As my college years flew by, I couldn't help but think about my family back home. I'd hear snippets from my sisters about how Sarah was still the golden child, how she was in all these clubs and always the center of attention. Mom and Dad are talking about sending her to some fancy private school, my sister Jessica told me during one of our secret calls. What about you and Emily? I asked, already knowing the answer. Oh, Jessica said, trying to sound nonchalant. We'll probably just go to the local high school. It's fine, really. But I knew it wasn't fine. I knew how it felt to be overlooked, to be treated like you didn't matter as much. It broke my heart that my sisters were going through the same thing. As graduation approached, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I'd done well in college, thanks in no small part to my grandmother's support. She'd been my rock through it all, always there with a kind word or a bit of advice when I needed it. I'm so proud of you, Catherine, she told me over the phone one night. You've overcome so much. Your grandfather would have been proud too. The day of my graduation, I scanned the crowd, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents and sisters would be there. But they weren't. The only familiar face in the sea of people was my grandmother's, beaming with pride. Fresh out of college, I hit the ground running. The job was challenging, but I thrived on it. Months flew by, and I settled into a routine. Work, gym, home, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but it was mine. I was building my own life, on my own terms. Then came the company's annual corporate party. I almost didn't go, large gatherings still made me a bit uncomfortable. But my colleague, Jen, insisted. Come on, Catherine, she pleaded. It'll be fun. Plus, I heard some bigwigs from our partner companies will be there. Great networking opportunity. The party was in full swing when I arrived. Soft jazz played in the background as people mingled, drinks in hand. I was about to make a beeline for the punch bowl when I quite literally bumped into someone. Oh, I'm so sorry, I stammered, looking up to see a pair of kind brown eyes. No harm done, the man said with a warm smile. I'm Michael, by the way. I don't think we've met. Catherine, I replied, shaking his hand. I'm from the economics department. We got to talking, and I learned that Michael was an executive from one of our partner companies. He was smart, funny, and easy to talk to. Before I knew it, hours had passed. As the party wound down, Michael asked for my number. I'd love to continue this conversation over coffee sometime, he said. I hesitated for a moment, then thought, why not? I'd spent so much of my life taking care of others. Maybe it was time to let someone take care of me for a change. Our first date turned into a second, then a third. Before I knew it, we were officially a couple. Michael was everything I'd never known I wanted, kind, supportive, and he actually listened when I talked. A year later, he proposed to me. As we started planning the wedding, I faced a dilemma. Should I invite my family? Despite everything, they were still my parents, my sisters. After much thought, I sent the invitations. To my parents, to all my sisters, even Sarah. I also sent one to my grandmother, the one person who had always been there for me. Weeks passed, and I heard nothing from my parents or sisters. Then, one day, I got a call from Emily. Kathy, she said, her voice trembling. We got your invitation. Mom and Dad, they won't let us come. They won't even let us send you a card. I'm so sorry. The day of the wedding arrived. As I stood in front of the mirror in my white dress, I felt a mix of joy and sadness. My grandmother walked in, her eyes shining with tears. Oh, Catherine, she said, hugging me tight. You look beautiful. I'm so proud of you. As I walked down the aisle towards Michael, I saw the faces of our friends, his family, and my grandmother. My family wasn't there, but I realized something important: family isn't always about blood. It's about love, support, and acceptance. The years after our wedding flew by in a whirlwind of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Michael and I settled into our life together, both of us continuing to work and build our careers. We traveled, we explored new hobbies together, and we talked endlessly about our future. And then we decided to start trying for a baby. Months passed, then a year, then 2. Nothing happened. We went through all the tests, tried every recommendation, but still, no baby. It was heartbreaking. The next few years were a roller coaster of hope and disappointment. We went through treatment after treatment, each failure hitting us harder than the last. One day, after another failed round of IVF, I broke down. Maybe we're not meant to be parents, I sobbed into Michael's chest. He held me tight, stroking my hair. Hey, look at me, he said gently. We're going to be parents. Maybe not in the way we originally thought, but we will be. What do you think about adoption? A child is a child, Catherine. All they need is love, and we've got plenty of that. His words warmed my heart, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Okay, I said, wiping my tears. Let's do it. Let's adopt. The adoption process was long and often frustrating. There were so many forms to fill out, interviews to go through, home studies to pass. But we persevered, driven by our desire to give a child a loving home. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we got the call. The day we met Lily was one I'll never forget. She was tiny, with big brown eyes and skin darker than ours. She looked scared and confused, clinging to her social worker's hand. I knelt down to her level. Hi, Lily, I said softly. I'm Catherine, and this is Michael. We've been waiting a long time to meet you. She looked at us warily, then back at her social worker, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, Lily reached out and took my hand. In that moment, I fell in love. This was our daughter. I didn't care that she didn't look like us or share our DNA. She was ours, and we were hers. When Lily was about 5, we sat her down and explained, in simple terms, how she came to be our daughter. We showed her pictures from the day we met her, told her how much we'd wanted her, how we'd fallen in love with her the moment we saw her. Lily listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When we finished, she was quiet for a moment. So, you picked me? She asked finally. I smiled, tears in my eyes. Yes, sweetheart. Out of all the children in the world, we picked you. And we'd pick you again every single time. She beamed at us, then threw her arms around us both. I love you, Mommy and Daddy, she said. As I held my daughter close, I thought about my own childhood. The pain, the neglect, the feeling of never being good enough. I vowed then and there that Lily would never feel that way. She would always know how loved and wanted she was. Life has a funny way of bringing you full circle. One day, Michael said his company had opened a branch in my hometown. And he will become the head of this branch. The move was chaotic, as moves tend to be. But as we settled into our new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to reach out to my sisters. My parents had passed away a few years back. I hadn't gone to the funeral. But my sisters, maybe it was time to mend those fences. I reached out to Jessica and Emily first. They were cautious at first, but eager to reconnect. We met for coffee, and it was like no time had passed at all. They cooed over pictures of Lily, told me about their own families, their kids. We've missed you so much, Kathy, Emily said, squeezing my hand. We're so glad you're back. For a while, everything was perfect. We started having family gatherings, holiday celebrations. Lily was thrilled to have cousins to play with, and I loved seeing her surrounded by family. But then there was Sarah, our youngest sister. From the moment we reconnected, I could tell she hadn't changed much. She was still the spoiled, entitled girl she'd always been, now grown into a woman who thought the world revolved around her and her family. At our first big family gathering, Sarah showed up with her husband and their son, Tommy. From the moment they arrived, it was clear that Sarah saw this as a competition rather than a reunion. "Tommy, show your aunties how well you can sing," she'd say, pushing her son forward. "He's taking lessons, you know. The teacher says he's a prodigy." As the party went on, I noticed Lily hanging back, looking uncomfortable. She approached Tommy, holding out a piece of candy. "Want to share?" she asked shyly. Before Tommy could respond, Sarah swooped in. "Tommy, don't take that," she screeched. "Throw it away. Her hands are dirty." I was across the room in an instant. "Sarah, what are you talking about? Lily's hands are clean." But Sarah just glared at me, then at Lily. "Well, you never know with her kind," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Come on, Tommy. Let's go play with your real cousins." I stood there, shocked and hurt. Did she really just say that? About my daughter? From that moment on, things were tense. Sarah made it clear at every gathering that she didn't consider Lily part of the family. She'd loudly proclaim that Tommy couldn't play with Lily because who knows what diseases she might have, or we don't know her genetic background. Each time, I'd confront her, defend my daughter. But the damage was being done. I could see Lily withdrawing, becoming quieter at these family events. One day, I made a decision. I wouldn't force Lily to attend these gatherings anymore. I started declining invitations, making excuses. Jessica and Emily understood, even though they were disappointed. As the dust settled from our move and the family drama that ensued, I found solace in my visits to Grandma. She had been my rock through everything, and now, in her twilight years, I wanted to be there for her as much as she had been for me. Every weekend, Lily and I would make the short drive to Grandma's house. She would be waiting on the porch, her face lighting up as soon as she saw us. "There's my girls," she'd call out, arms outstretched. Lily would race up the steps, throwing herself into Grandma's embrace. "Grandma, I missed you." Watching them together always warmed my heart. Grandma doted on Lily, showering her with love and attention. She never once treated Lily differently because she was adopted. To Grandma, Lily was family, plain and simple. As the months passed, Grandma's health began to decline. Our visits became less about long talks and more about quiet companionship. Lily would read to her, or show her drawings she'd made. Even in her weakened state, Grandma's love for us shone through. The day Grandma passed was one of the hardest of my life. We'd been there with her at the end, holding her hand as she slipped away peacefully. Lily, wise beyond her years, had climbed onto the bed and curled up next to her great-grandmother. "It's okay, Grandma," she'd whispered. "You can rest now. We love you." In the days that followed, as we dealt with our grief and the logistics that come with losing a loved one, we received some unexpected news. Grandma's lawyer called, asking us to come to his office. "Your grandmother left a will," he explained when we arrived. And, well, you might want to sit down for this. What he told us next left me speechless. Grandma had left everything to me and Lily. The house, several cars, and over $1 million. "Your grandfather was quite successful," the lawyer explained. "And your grandmother was an astute investor. She had intended to leave it all to your mother, despite their estrangement. But when your mother passed..." I nodded, understanding. Grandma had changed her will, leaving everything to us. When word got out about the inheritance, my phone started ringing off the hook. Jessica and Emily called to congratulate me, saying I deserved it. But then came the call I'd been dreading. "Sarah." "Catherine," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "I heard about Grandma's will. So, when are you sharing the inheritance with the rest of us?" I felt a flash of anger. After everything she'd said and done, how dare she? "I'm not," I said firmly. "The inheritance is for me and Lily. That's what Grandma wanted." "But that's not fair," Sarah screeched. "I'm family too. I deserve..." I cut her off. "No, Sarah, you don't. Goodbye." And I hung up. As I put down the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For so long, I'd tried to please everyone, to be the perfect daughter and sister. But now, I realized it was time to put my own family first. It was Jessica's birthday, and despite my reservations, I decided it was time to make an appearance at a family gathering. When we arrived, the party was in full swing. Jessica's backyard was filled with laughter and chatter. Kids ran around playing tag while adults mingled, drinks in hand. For a moment, it felt like old times. Jessica embraced me warmly. "I'm so glad you came, Kathy," she whispered. I could see the genuine happiness in her eyes. For the first hour or so, everything was fine. Lily joined her cousins on the lawn, their laughter floating across the yard. I relaxed a bit, thinking maybe this wasn't such a bad idea after all. But then I saw Sarah. She was moving from child to child, whispering in their ears. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw the way the kids' eyes widened, the way they glanced at Lily. Suddenly, Lily was standing alone. The other children had moved away, forming their own group, pointedly excluding her. I watched as my daughter's face crumpled in confusion and hurt. Before I could react, Lily ran to me, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy," she sobbed, "they don't want to play with me anymore. They said I'm sick and not really family." Rage boiled up inside me. I hugged Lily close, then marched over to Sarah, who was watching the scene with a smug smile. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Sarah's smile didn't falter. "Oh, calm down, Catherine. I'm just telling the children the truth. They deserve to know about her condition." "Condition?" I spat. "The only person with a condition here is you, Sarah. Your behavior is disgusting." By now, we'd drawn a crowd. The other adults were watching, wide-eyed, as the confrontation unfolded. Sarah's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "My behavior? That's rich coming from you, Catherine. You, who shamelessly took Grandma's money, robbing the rest of us of our rightful inheritance. And for what? To give money to that girl who isn't even really part of this family?" Gasps echoed around us. "How dare you?" I seethed. "Lily is my daughter. She is as much a part of this family as anyone else." Sarah laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Family? She's not even related to us. She's just some random kid you picked up, probably born to drug addicts or criminals. She has no right to our family's legacy." I was shaking with fury now. "You don't know anything about Lily or her birth parents. And it doesn't matter. She is my daughter, and I love her more than anything in this world." "Love?" Sarah sneered. "Is that what you call it when you use a child to steal from your own family? Face it, Catherine. You're nothing but a thief, using that girl to get Grandma's money. Well, we won't stand for it anymore. It's time you shared what rightfully belongs to all of us." I was about to respond when Jessica stepped forward, her face set in determination. "That's enough, Sarah," she said firmly. "You have no right to speak to Catherine like that, or to treat Lily this way." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "What, you're taking her side?" Emily joined Jessica, standing beside me. "We both are. Catherine has always been there for us, even when our own parents weren't. She raised us, Sarah. She deserves every penny of that inheritance." I felt a lump form in my throat, touched by my sister's support. Sarah's face contorted with rage. "You traitors! How dare you? You're betraying the memory of our parents." Emily scoffed. "Our parents? The same parents who neglected us and showered you with attention? The same parents who cut Catherine off for daring to want an education?" Jessica nodded. "And let's not forget, Sarah, how you took Mom and Dad's house and all their savings after they died. You didn't share a cent of that with any of us." I gasped, this information new to me. "What? Is that true, Sarah?" Sarah's face paled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "It's true," Emily confirmed. "She got everything when Mom and Dad passed, and she never once offered to share. A wave of disappointment and anger washed over me. All this time, Sarah had been accusing me of theft when she'd done the very same thing. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady and firm. "I think it's time for you to leave." "You can't make me," she started, but Jessica cut her off. "Yes, she can. This is my house, and I want you to go. We're all tired of your tantrums and your cruelty. Until you can treat Catherine and Lily with respect, you're not welcome here." Sarah looked around, realizing she was outnumbered. With a final glare, she grabbed her son's hand and stormed off. As the gate slammed behind her, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I turned to my sisters, tears in my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. Later that night, I made a decision. The next day, I called my sisters and told them my plan. Despite their protests that I didn't need to do this, I insisted. I gave them the house and the cars, keeping the $1 million for our family. With the inheritance settled, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I transferred half of the money to a trust fund for Lily's future, ensuring she would always be taken care of. The other half, Michael and I decided to use for our family. We'd take that trip to Disney World that Lily had been dreaming of. We'd renovate our home, creating the perfect space for our little family. And maybe, just maybe, we'd look into adopting another child, giving Lily the sibling she'd always wanted.
I'm Jessica, 35, thriving in my marketing career and living the suburban dream with my husband, Mike. We've been married for 10 years, and though we don't have kids, we're the cool aunt and uncle to my brother-in-law Matthew's daughters, Susan and Lisa. It was a typical Friday evening when the girls came over for the weekend. Mike was firing up the grill, and I was setting the table when I noticed something seemed off with Susan. "Hey, kiddo, everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She shrugged. "Yeah, I guess." But her face told me otherwise. Later that night, after Lisa had gone to bed, Susan and I were cleaning up the kitchen. "So how's life with the new stepmom?" I asked gently. Susan's expression fell. "It's different." She hesitated, and then it all came out. "Vanessa's always on our case. Nothing we do is ever good enough. She's always criticizing us, finding reasons to punish us. Last week, she took away my phone because I got home 2 minutes late from school." My heart sank. "Have you talked to your dad about this?" Susan shook her head. "He doesn't see it. Or maybe he doesn't want to." I tried to reassure her, but inside, I was fuming. The next day, I decided to call Matthew. "Hey Matthew, do you have a minute? I'm a bit worried." Susan seemed off. "Is everything okay at home?" There was a pause. "Everything's fine, Jessica. The girls are just adjusting to having Vanessa around. It's a big change, you know." I could sense he wasn't open to discussing it further, so I dropped it, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. That night, I lay awake restless until Mike found me in the kitchen at 2 a.m., nursing a cup of tea. "What's on your mind, hon?" he asked, sitting beside me. I filled him in on my conversation with Susan and Matthew's dismissive response. "That doesn't sound good," he agreed. "But what can we do? They're not our kids," I sighed. "I know, but they're family. We can't just ignore this." We stayed up, brainstorming ways to help without overstepping. A few days later, I was in the middle of a conference call when my phone started buzzing. Lisa's name flashed on the screen, and a feeling of dread washed over me. "Aunt Jessica, please help us." Her voice came barely above a whisper, thick with fear. "Vanessa locked us in our room. We haven't eaten since yesterday. Dad's not answering his phone. I'm scared." My blood ran cold. "Stay calm, sweetie. We're coming." I rushed to Mike's office, heart racing. "We need to go now." The drive to Matthew's house was a blur, my mind filled with the worst possible scenarios. When we arrived, Vanessa's car was in the driveway. "Stay calm," Mike warned. "We don't want to make things worse for the girls." I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Vanessa answered, putting on a bright fake smile. "Jessica." "Mike." What a surprise. "What brings you here?" I forced a smile. "We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd drop by to see the girls." "Oh, they're upstairs doing homework. You know how teenagers procrastinate." I clenched my fists at her casual lie. "Mind if we say hi?" Her smile faltered for a split second, but she stepped aside. Of course. Come on up. We climbed the stairs, with Vanessa trailing close behind. When we reached the girls' room, the door was shut with a chair wedged under the handle. My stomach turned. What's this? I asked, pointing to the chair. Vanessa laughed nervously. Oh, that. The girls were messing around earlier and must have forgotten to move it. I removed the chair and opened the door. Susan and Lisa were huddled together on the bed, their tear-streaked faces lighting up with relief when they saw us. Girls, why don't we come downstairs? I'm sure you're hungry, I said, shooting a pointed look at Vanessa. As Lisa stood, I noticed dark bruises on her arm. My blood boiled, but I held back, knowing it wasn't the time. Actually, I said, turning to Vanessa, why don't the girls come stay with us for a few days? Give you a break while Matthew's away. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. That's not necessary. Please, Susan pleaded softly, we miss Aunt Jessica and Uncle Mike. After a tense silence, Vanessa relented. Fine, but only until Matthew gets back. The car ride home was quiet, but once inside, the floodgates opened. Susan and Lisa poured out months of pain and fear. She calls us worthless. Susan sobbed, says we're the reason Dad can't be happy. Last week, Lisa added, voice shaking, she pushed me down the stairs because I forgot to take out the trash. After the girls fell asleep, I confided in Mike, we need to document everything. Matthew has to see the truth. Over the next few days, we carefully gathered evidence, photos of the girls' bruises, recordings of their accounts. It was heart-wrenching, but necessary. Then, the storm hit. Matthew burst through our front door, his face twisted with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing, Jessica? Kidnapping my kids? Matthew, please, you need to listen. I began, trying to keep calm. No, listen, he shouted. You've always been jealous of Vanessa. Now you're turning my own daughters against her. I took a deep breath. Matthew, the girls are being abused. We have proof. Proof? What proof? He sneered. A few crocodile tears and made-up stories. Susan and Lisa appeared in the doorway, drawn by the shouting. Dad, please, Susan begged. It's all true. Vanessa is hurting us, Lisa whispered, clinging to me. But Matthew's face only darkened. Enough, he bellowed. Get your things. We're going home. The girls clung to me, their faces full of fear. No, Dad, Lisa's voice shook. We're not going back there. You ungrateful brats. He yelled, his face a deep shade of purple. After everything I've done for you. At that moment, Mike stepped between Matthew and the girls. I think you should leave, Matthew, now. For a tense moment, I thought Matthew might throw a punch, but instead he spat, you'll be hearing from my lawyer, before storming out. The next morning, before I'd even had my coffee, I was on the phone with Child Protective Services, detailing everything we knew. The woman on the line listened patiently. We'll launch an investigation immediately, she assured me, but these things take time. Time. It was the one thing I felt we didn't have. But we had to trust the process. Weeks dragged by, but the girls began to settle into a routine with us. Still, a shadow of uncertainty hung over everything. One afternoon, I overheard Susan on the phone with a friend. Yeah, I'm staying with my aunt and uncle for a while. It's complicated. My heart ached. These kids deserved so much better. Mike and I poured ourselves into creating a stable, comforting environment. We found a therapist who specialized in trauma, and I'll never forget Susan's words after her first session. It's nice to talk to someone who doesn't think I'm crazy or lying. We helped them catch up on missed schoolwork, celebrating every small victory. Slowly, we saw glimpses of the vibrant girls we remembered. One day, Lisa came bouncing into the kitchen, waving a flyer. Aunt Jessica, there's a local art class. Can I sign up? I hugged her tight. Of course, sweetie. While the girls were healing, things with Matthew were deteriorating. His texts grew more hostile. You've poisoned my daughters against me. I'm getting a lawyer. You'll regret this. I tried reasoning with him, but it was like talking to a wall. That's when I decided to take things into my own hands. I contacted a private investigator. I want you to dig into Vanessa's past, I told him. There's got to be more to her story. 2 weeks later, he came back with a bombshell. Vanessa had a history of similar allegations in previous relationships. There was even a restraining order filed by her ex-husband's kids. Jesus, Mike muttered as we pored over the files. How did Matthew not know about this? I shook my head, compiling everything into a dossier, but something held me back from turning it over just yet. We needed ironclad proof if we were going to make Matthew see the truth. As summer turned to fall, I watched Susan and Lisa blossom. They made new friends, rediscovered old hobbies. But every time Matthew's name flashed on my phone, I was reminded that this peace was fragile. One night, as Mike and I lay in bed, I voiced my deepest fear. What if we lose them? Mike squeezed my hand. We won't. We'll fight with everything we've got. I nodded, praying he was right, because the thought of sending those girls back to that house was unimaginable. Months crawled by, and the official investigation seemed to go nowhere. Matthew stonewalled every attempt to cooperate, making it difficult for CPS to build a case. Meanwhile, Vanessa's life began unraveling. We heard through the grapevine that she'd been fired for embezzlement, and Matthew's friends started distancing themselves, muttering about her increasingly erratic behavior. Then came the night that changed everything. It was past midnight when our doorbell started ringing nonstop. Security footage showed Vanessa, clearly intoxicated, swaying on our porch. "Let me see my girls," she slurred, pounding on the door. Chaos erupted as she grew more belligerent, and it wasn't long before the police arrived, arresting her as she kicked and screamed. The girls huddled in the living room, both terrified and relieved. "It's over," Susan whispered. "It's finally over." With Vanessa's arrest, everything we had gathered finally came to light. Faced with undeniable evidence, Matthew crumbled. He showed up at our door a week later, looking like he aged a decade. "I'm so sorry," he choked out. "I should have listened. I should have protected them." The girls were cautious but agreed to talk. After a long, tearful conversation, Lisa spoke up. "We want to try," she said, "but we need rules. Family therapy, and if Vanessa stays gone. Forever." Matthew nodded, relief and determination in his eyes. "Anything. I'll do anything to make this right." Life gradually settled into a new normal. Susan and Lisa stayed with us, thriving in the stable environment we provided. They began having supervised visits with Matthew, slowly rebuilding trust. One evening, as Mike and I watched the girls laughing in the backyard, he turned to me. "We're pretty good at this parenting thing." I smiled. "Yeah, maybe we are. Maybe we should look into fostering." Months later, I found a letter on my nightstand. Inside was a hand-drawn card from Susan and Lisa. "Dear Aunt Jessica and Uncle Mike, we don't know where we'd be without you. Thank you for fighting for us, for believing us, for loving us. You saved us in every way a person can be saved. We love you, Susan and Lisa." I hugged the card to my chest, tears flowing freely. The road had been long and hard, but seeing those girls heal and grow made every battle worth it. We had weathered the storm together and come out stronger on the other side. Now I have a question for you. If you were in Jessica's position, would you have confronted Matthew earlier about Vanessa's behavior, even without concrete evidence? Or would you have waited to gather proof, knowing the girls might suffer longer? This is a tough dilemma that many face when suspecting abuse. There's no easy answer, but your perspective could help others in similar situations. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hey everyone, I'm Margaret, a 27-year-old corporate lawyer at Wilson & Brooks. But my journey here wasn't easy. I began feeling a mix of pride and nostalgia. "Margaret, these flower arrangements are gorgeous," Sarah exclaimed, scrolling through options on her iPad. My best friend and my wedding planner had truly been a lifesaver. "Mom would have loved these white roses. They were her favorite," I murmured, feeling that familiar ache in my chest. "She used to grow them in our backyard." "Tell me more about her," Henry said, squeezing my hand. My fiancé always knew when I needed comfort. "Linda Mitchell was the kindest soul you'd ever meet. I was 15 when cancer took her, but those memories," I smiled faintly. "Back then, Dad and I were so close. He'd swing me around the kitchen while Mom cooked Sunday dinners, calling me his little attorney because I always argued about bedtime." My smile faded. 3 months. It only took him 3 months to bring Patricia home, I added bitterly. And everything changed. "She's really outdone herself this time," Uncle Thomas said, stepping into the room. "Your father just called. Patricia's insisting on hosting the engagement party at their house instead of the venue you booked." Classic Pat. Sarah rolled her eyes. Remember when she accidentally spilled wine on your law school graduation dress? She asked. Or when she convinced your dad you were too busy to join their Christmas vacation, then posted all those perfect family photos without you? I nodded. The memory's sour. And Dad always defends her. He's so blind to her games. Uncle Thomas put a comforting hand on my shoulder. I saw through her the moment your father brought her home. The way she moved your mother's photos to the attic and replaced them with her own. I swallowed hard. But look at me now, partner at 27 and marrying the most amazing pediatrician. I grinned at Henry. Speaking of which, should I tell them how you proposed? Oh God, please don't, I laughed, recalling that chaotic night. He tried cooking my favorite pasta but ended up setting off the fire alarm for the entire building. But I still said yes. Between coughs. I laughed. Even with mascara running down my face from the smoke, the ring was in the garlic bread. That didn't burn, Henry defended himself, making everyone laugh. Uncle Thomas checked his watch, looking serious. Speaking of Patricia, she's been asking about your mother's jewelry collection. My stomach twisted. She better stay away from Mom's things, I said tensely. I still can't find Mom's pearl earrings after Patricia helped organize my closet last year. Don't worry, sweetheart, Uncle Thomas assured. I got your back, always have, always will. At least the wedding planning's going smoothly, aside from Pat trying to change everything Sarah and I decide on. I sighed. Sarah smirked. Just wait until she finds out you're planning to wear your mom's wedding dress. I wish you were here, Mom, I whispered, gently tracing the lace on her wedding gown. You know exactly how to handle all this. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the ivory silk. Mom had incredible taste. Just then, the door burst open, and Patricia stormed in, her face twisted with anger. So this is what you're doing behind my back. I told you I already ordered a new dress. This is my mother's dress, Pat. I'm wearing it. Patricia's face contorted. After I spent thousands on that designer gown? David, come see how your daughter is disrespecting me again. My father appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted. What's going on? She's deliberately excluding me from the wedding preparations, Patricia cried. I'm her stepmother. Pat, please, calm down, Sarah interjected, but Patricia was seething. Calm down. When she parades around in this old rag just to spite me, Patricia shrieked, lunging forward and grabbing the dress. Let go, I shouted, but it was too late. The horrible sound of tearing fabric filled the room as Patricia yanked, ripping a massive hole through the bodice. Oh my God, Sarah gasped. Henry rushed in, alarmed by the commotion. What happened? I stood there, trembling, holding the ruined remains of my mother's wedding dress. How could you? I whispered, my voice breaking. You brought this on yourself, Dad said, his words hitting me like a slap. If you had just included Patricia. Included her? I was shaking. She just destroyed Mom's dress, and you're defending her. You've been pushing her away since day one, always throwing your mother's memory in her face. Henry stepped forward, his voice firm. David, this is too far. Your wife just destroyed a family heirloom. Patricia sneered. Like those tacky old jewels she's so precious about. My blood ran cold. What did you do with Mom's jewelry? I have no idea what you're talking about, she said, but her smirk said otherwise. Empty your closet, Pat. Now, Uncle Thomas's commanding voice cut through the room, and we all turned. He stood in the doorway, fury radiating from him. You have no right. I have every right, Uncle Thomas said. That jewelry collection belongs to Margaret. It was in Linda's will, Uncle Thomas reminded them, his tone icy. This is my house, Dad argued, his face darkening, and those are my mother's things. He glared at me as if I was the intruder. What else has she taken? I demanded, my voice shaking. Check the pawn shops, Sarah whispered. Bet that's where Mom's pearl earrings went. Get out of my house, Patricia shrieked. Gladly, but this isn't over, I shot back, turning toward the door. Don't you dare walk out, Dad yelled after me. Or what, Dad? I replied, my voice cold. You'll blame me for that too. You might have destroyed her dress, but you'll never destroy her memory. Henry wrapped his arm around me as we left. I'm calling my lawyer first thing tomorrow. We're going to find everything she took, Margaret. I promise. As we drove away, I watched through my tears as Dad comforted Patricia in the doorway. It felt like the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. 2 weeks later, Sarah spread a series of files across my dining room table. 3 previous marriages, all to wealthy men. All ended under suspicious circumstances, she said, laying out court records. And look, Patricia filed for bankruptcy right before meeting your dad. Yet somehow, when she moved in, she had designer clothes and a new car. There's more. Sarah pulled up an email. Remember that pawn shop on 5th Street? I got confirmation she sold your mom's sapphire necklace there 3 months ago. My hands shook as I dialed Uncle Thomas. He answered on the first ring. Already at the jewelry store. The owner remembers her well. She's been selling pieces for years. I'm getting security footage. My phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Amy. Margaret, Pat's telling everyone you're lying about the dress incident because you're jealous of her and Uncle David's relationship. Sarah shook her head. Classic manipulation. But wait until they see this. She showed me a Facebook post from 2015. There was Patricia sitting with Dad at a cafe. The date stamp was 2 weeks before Mom's death. They were having an affair while Mom was dying. My voice cracked. Look at her hand on his. Sarah's tone grew serious. It gets worse. Your dad's company records just came through. Patricia's been named primary beneficiary of everything. House, business, life insurance. The changes were made last month. Just then, my phone rang, Patricia's number. Put it on speaker, Sarah whispered, hitting record on her phone. You think you're so clever, digging around. Patricia's voice was venomous. Back off, or I'll make sure you lose everything. Like you made Mom lose everything. I shot back. Oh, your precious mother was weak, she sneered. I saw what I wanted and took it. David was so easy to manipulate while she was wasting away in that hospital. I clenched my fists. And now you're taking her jewelry? Taking? Patricia laughed. Honey, I've been selling her trashy trinkets since year 1. David never noticed, just like he won't notice when I'm done cleaning out the company accounts. You won't get away with this. Watch me. I just convinced your father to remove you from his will completely. Apparently, you're too unstable to inherit anything. Good luck proving otherwise. Those were your mother's things, and now they're mine, just like everything else. After she hung up, Sarah stopped the recording, a triumphant look on her face. Just then, a text came in from Dad. Your behavior is destroying this family. Until you apologize to Patricia, don't bother coming home. Ugly want a war, I said, pulling out Mom's old diary, which I found hidden in the attic last week. Let's give them one. What's that? Sarah asked, her eyes narrowing. Mom's record of everything. Dated entries of her catching Dad and Patricia together. Emails from her old computer. She knew Sarah. She knew they were having an affair. Sarah nodded, resolute. No more playing nice. They want to erase your mom. Let's see how they handle the truth coming out. Just then, Uncle Thomas called again. Margaret, I've got proof Patricia's been forging your father's signature on company checks. You won't believe who she's been paying. A week later, breaking news blared from my office TV. Local businesswoman Patricia Mitchell arrested in connection with a multi-state fraud scheme. Sarah grabbed the remote, turning up the volume as the anchor continued. The FBI investigation reveals a pattern of insurance fraud spanning 3 states, with estimated damages in the millions. My phone rang. It was Uncle Thomas. Margaret, you need to hear this. Your father just caught Patricia with Jack Thompson, his own business partner. Not only that, but they've been embezzling together. David walked in on them transferring company funds offshore. Before I could react, my office door burst open. Dad stood there, looking shattered. Margaret, I need your help. The company, Patricia, she. Let me guess. I interrupted. She cleaned out the accounts. Dad's face crumbled. How did you? The same way she did with her last 3 husbands. Remember Robert Kane? He's been building a case against her for years. He reached out to me last month. He took a shaky breath. The company's bankrupt, the loans she took out. I'm losing everything, Margaret. I was wrong about everything. Your mother's dress, her jewelry, her memory. Henry stepped in, his voice calm but firm. Mr. Mitchell, I think it's time for you to leave. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Pat just tried boarding a flight to Cancun. FBI grabbed her at the gate. I looked back at Dad. You know what's funny? All these years, you chose her over me, and she was playing you the entire time. I can fix this, he whispered. No, you can't. Uncle Thomas helped me protect Mom's inheritance, the only assets Pat couldn't touch. The company's gone, Dad, just like our relationship. 3 months later, I stood in front of the mirror in my wedding dress. Not my mom's, but still perfect. Uncle Thomas appeared in the doorway, ready to walk me down the aisle. Sarah adjusted my veil, smiling. Pat's sentencing is tomorrow. 20 years minimum. And Dad? He was living with his sister, asking if he could still be a part of the wedding. But some bridges can't be rebuilt. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with people who truly loved us. No Patricia. No Dad. No toxic drama. Later that night, during the reception, Uncle Thomas raised his glass. To Margaret and Henry, and to Linda, who's watching over her daughter today. My phone lit up with a message from Dad. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm so sorry, Margaret. For everything. Henry pulled me close, looking around at my real family, Uncle Thomas, Sarah, Henry, and our friends. I smiled, feeling ready for this new life. Some people might call it karma. I call it justice. Either way, I won. What would you do if someone close to you tried to erase the memory of a loved one you'd lost? Would you hope they change, or would you protect yourself, even if it meant losing them? Let me know your thoughts below.